GPUs are actually coming back into stock as crypto prices level off. We have several great choices for gaming processors, and Hyte just released this slick new enclosure. It's finally time to start building PCs again, and I'm excited about it. Welcome to BPS Customs, guys. My name is Brian, and if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. If you like reviews, PC builds, and how-tos, make sure to hit that subscribe button before heading out. It does help out a ton. For a long part of the channel's history, my most popular content has been my series of PC builds, showing off what hardware works well for specific applications, what thermals look like under real-world scenarios, and what RGB effects look best in any given case was a staple of what I built this channel on. But for obvious reasons, that has kind of faded over the years as interest waned. This was a shame, as the hardware available today is not only the most powerful, but also some of the most interesting stuff that I've ever gotten my hands on. I hope to be able to bring you more interesting builds moving forward, starting with this one right here. We won't be talking through the build process of this one. Instead, I'm going to time-lapse it, the whole thing, and you could see it at the end of the video if you want to. I was more interested in checking out a few new pieces of hardware that had recently come through the offices than deep diving into the build itself. The first one, obviously, is the Y60 case from iBuyPower's new gaming brand, Hyte. At first glance, it might slightly resemble another attempt at recreating the Lian Li 011 dynamic. But upon further investigation, it actually has several significant differences and was actually awesome to build in. The first thing that you notice is that the front corner of the case is a separate piece of glass positioned at a 45-degree caddy corner. This creates an interesting new viewing angle for your components, as you can now peer through here instead of only maybe from the side or from the front. The second major change, and you can judge for yourself if this is a good one or a bad one, is that the case is specifically designed to only work with half-height PCIe expansion cards. As such, most GPUs will have to be used in the upright position and utilize the included PCIe Gen 4 riser cable. The space afforded here for GPU airflow is a full 3 slots in the vertical orientation, and in order to make sure that your GPU is breathing right, Hyte builds in two 120mm fans into the floor of the Y60, blowing directly upwards and across your GPU cooling fins. We'll talk about if this works later on in the video. Also included here is a third 120mm fan positioned as exhaust. The rest of the case layout supports two fans along the rear wall and up to three at the top. The top of the case is built with a recessed radiator bracket that's removable for ease of install. I/O is situated along the bottom of the 45-degree accent, which I think is perfect positioning for almost any user. I was pretty excited to build in this thing, so I picked out some parts that would allow me to put together a powerful gaming system while also testing out the overclocking abilities of both our 12700K processor from Intel and the new Z690 Aorus Tachyon motherboard. The 12700K is the returning champion of mainstream gaming, offering 8 performance cores with hyper-threading plus an additional 4 efficiency cores. The performance cores have a max single-core turbo of 5 GHz, and we're going to push that up significantly here today. The Aorus Tachyon is a board that I've wanted to use for a good amount of time since it arrived in the office, and to be honest, the best use for it would probably be to strap an LN2 pot to it and hit negative 150 degrees on a 12900KS. But it still has a ton of practical daily features that makes it an interesting candidate for a build like this. First of all, the power delivery system is completely overbuilt, so overclocking any 12th gen Intel chip is going to be no sweat. Secondly, it looks super aggressive and it has some really cool RGB accents cut into around the chipset cover. And despite being an OC focused board, it has creature features like an LED postcode readout, multiple RGB headers, and a USB Type-C front panel header. I want to do more work with this thing in the future, but for now we're going to see what it can do for you in a daily driver type build with a processor like the 12700K. Now, we've cooled the CPU with a simple 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler from Cooler Master, the Master Liquid PL360 Flux. Originally, I was going to use the Lumen from Fractal Design, but unfortunately discovered that I have the version that doesn't ship with a mounting bracket for LGA 1700, which obviously we need here. Using just a standard off-the-shelf 360mm AIO will allow us to test the practical overclocking capabilities of an enclosed full system, as opposed to doing so under optimal conditions and an open-air bench. I rounded out the system with 32 gigs of DDR5 from Kingston Fury and an overkill 1200 watt power supply from Be Quiet. Our GPU for this build is the RTX 3080 Gaming X Trio from MSI. First up, let's talk about thermals. Stock CPU thermals were excellent, sitting at 66C for the package under full load as measured with Hardware Info 64. GPU temps were also well within the acceptable range and didn't fluctuate too much even under long gaming sessions. This is a testament to the airflow design of the case, as well as the addition of the two fans at the bottom for intake. While overclocking, the more extreme we got, obviously the closer we got to TJ Maxx and thermal throttling of the 12700K. Right before a crash, I did see temps get up to 96 degrees, but to be honest, if we're pushing a CPU like the 12700K this hard, we should probably be working with at least a custom loop. Under normal circumstances, I'd say the Y60 passes my thermal testing with flying colors. Next up was some performance benchmarking. I tested out 4 games at 4K and absolutely the max settings that I could achieve. This meant cranking all the settings and turning on any ray tracing features that were available and not using any DLSS. First up was Far Cry 6, which came in at an average of 65 FPS. I did notice a couple of frame stutters here that dipped the frame rate at various times, but I've seen this same behavior in this specific test with multiple GPU-CPU combos, and I think it's more the benchmark than the hardware. Next up was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which posted a similar 62 FPS. This is a difficult title to run at these settings, and the game looked great. Putting up the exact same score was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy at 62 FPS. I've never actually played this game, but I've heard that it's great fun, and the ultra-detailed ray trace reflections look pretty crazy at times. And our last game was Red Dead Redemption 2, which ran at 73 FPS across the entire built-in benchmark. Overall, the gaming benchmark scoring looked like this, with each game cracking that ever so important 60 FPS barrier. Now it's time to see what overclocking can do for us. Again, keep in mind that I was working with a system in an enclosed case and a 360mm AIO. I also didn't deep dive into many settings here. This was mostly a test of what you can expect as a normal user that just wants to push frequencies a little bit higher. I was overclocking through the Gigabyte UEFI, which I'll admit is not my favorite. I adjusted the clock multiplier in increments of 1, starting at 50. For the uninitiated, this means that I was setting all of the performance cores to run at 5 GHz, then 5.1 GHz, then 5.2, etc. While a processor with a 5 GHz turbo sounds impressive on the surface, keep in mind that usually this means that 1 or maybe at most 2 cores will be hitting that speed at any given time. I was pushing all of the cores to that threshold and then beyond. I was able to quickly and easily clock the 12700K up to 5 GHz all core, 5.1 and then 5.2. 5.3 GHz created some stability issues and would likely require additional fine-tuning of voltage in order to be viable as a daily setting in this kind of build with this cooling solution. Performance gains were measurable here as I ran the TimeSpy Extreme CPU test as a good, repeatable benchmark. So the Y60 build is complete, and I am extremely happy with how it came out. Not only do we have a sweet looking system, but performance is top notch, and a configuration like this actually has room to grow. The 12700K can be swapped for a 12900K if you so desire, and there are a number of GPUs out now that will outperform the 3080. Memory can be bumped up to 64 gigs, and as always, storage can be upgraded. But you don't need to do any of that if you don't want to, and just as presented, this is a fully capable 4K gaming PC. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you drop a like down below. Don't forget that you can support the channel through the BPS Customs merch store at bpscustoms.com. Also, stay tuned for that full time-lapse build if that's what you're into, and I will see you next time.
10 toes down, I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do for the gang. 10 toes down, I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do took that blame. All money in, we ain't copping no chain. Feel like Ice Cube, cause a dead good day. Don't need 3 whips, don't need no race. I'ma keep it simple in the Chevy I skate. Thank the Lord every time I wait. Lace my shoes and I get to that cake. Heads up, I'm coming. This is all we ever wanted. Go and stack it by the hundreds. This is all we ever wanted. 10 toes down, I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do for the gang. 10 toes down, I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do for the gang. Pedal to the floor, to the engine. Head up in the clouds when I levitate. We don't spit game, we just educate. 10-10-80, had a paper straight. Couldn't get it back then, so I had to wait. Now the money come to me, so I don't have to chase. I don't gotta flash nothing, I don't gotta fake, darling. We not practicing, we ballin'. And heads up, I'm coming. This is all we ever wanted. Go and stack it by the hundreds. Heads up, I'm coming. This is all we ever wanted. Go and stack it by the hundreds. This is all we ever wanted. I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do for the gang. 10 toes down, I'ma ride with the gang. My whole life I've been doing my thing. Get that money, ain't no thing. Anything I do for the gang.
I wait for someone to save. I wanna tell you something new. You drove us both into a wall. I drive away into the night, and I contemplate for a while. Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you wish I would've been someone else? I wanna feel your gap without making a mess at you. Oh, won't you tell me something new? I wanna tell you something new. I wish you all the best I can, and I stop myself for a while. I'm saying things I don't believe. The panic rising up in you. Why won't you tell me something new? Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you wish I would've been someone else? I wanna feel your gap without making a mess at you. Why won't you tell me something new? I wanna tell you something new. You drove us both into a wall. I drive away into the night, and I contemplate for a while. Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you think you wanna be for the best? If I pack my stuff and leave sooner than this. Don't you wish I would've been someone else? I wanna feel your gap without making a mess at you. Why won't you tell me something new? Wish you all the best I can, then I stop myself for a while.